The stars moved slowly outside the silver windows of the Grand Archive Station, which floated in silence above the blue gas giant named Orith in Sector Zeta 9. It was a place where knowledge from all over the galaxy was kept, where alien scholars from many worlds came to learn and study and protect the truths of time and history. Terrell was a young scholar from the peaceful race called the Zarnak, who looked like tall, thin beings with smooth green skin, 4 fingers on each hand, and large golden eyes that shimmered under any kind of light. He had always loved the stories of old civilizations and the ancient battles between stars, but more than anything, he loved secrets, especially the ones no one wanted to touch. One quiet cycle Terrell was inside the deep chamber of restricted knowledge, where old records were kept inside glowing cubes of blue light. His fingers moved gently over the crystal screen, searching through the list of archived species, when suddenly one title made him stop and blink in surprise. The cube read Earth classification, red access, forbidden Earth. He whispered with a tilt of his head, "That name sounds familiar." He tapped it again, and the screen flashed a warning symbol in red text: access denied, extreme violence, content, class 5 permission. Oh no, now his curiosity was on fire. He looked around the chamber, but he was alone. As usual, no one came this deep into the archives unless they had clearance or courage, and sometimes Terrell had both. He tapped a second code, a secret one his mentor had once shown him for emergencies only, and the lock cracked open with a soft chime. The cube began to glow brighter, and images started to float in the air in front of him. Dark images, bloody images, the kind no one ever showed on the archive halls. The first image was of fire, whole cities burning, humans screaming, tanks rolling through rubble, smoke thick in the sky, and bodies lying still in the streets. Terrell stepped back, his eyes wide. "What is this?" he whispered. The next image showed a group of humans holding weapons, shouting at each other in a language he did not know. Some of them had strange signs painted on their faces, others carried flags covered in red. He saw children hiding under broken walls, soldiers with metal masks shooting into the crowd, and a man standing on a pile of ruins shouting into the smoke. The cube voice spoke softly in galactic standard: Earth, homeworld of the human species, status abandoned, civilization level high, technological advancement, advanced history record classified due to graphic content. Terrell shook his head. "This must be a mistake," he said aloud. "This can't be real." He rushed from the chamber, cube in hand, and went straight to the upper council of scholars, where the ancient ones sat all day in their glowing chairs, reading the stars and teaching young minds. He held out the cube to the nearest elder, a blue-skinned being with 4 eyes and a long white beard. "Master Yull, I found something strange." "Very strange." The elder looked at the cube, and his face changed. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice cold and sharp from the restricted chamber. Terrell replied, "I unlocked it. It says Earth was real, but look at these records. They are filled with war, fire, pain, and death." The other elders turned now, their faces calm, but their eyes not friendly. "Young Terrell," one of them said, "Earth is a legend, only a myth used to scare young scholars into peace. Tales of endless war are not real. No race would ever harm itself like that. But this is a record, not a story." Terrell insisted. "This is from the official archive, was removed for a reason." The elder replied calmly, "No one benefits from lies and fear. Stories like this are poison to the mind. Forget what you saw and focus on peaceful studies, as your people have always done." Terrell felt heat in his chest. This was wrong. Something inside him told him the cube was not fake. This was not a myth. It was hidden for a reason, and he wanted to know why. Later that same cycle, Terrell sat alone in his quarters, staring at the cube again. He replayed the images again and again: fire, guns, screams, towers falling, oceans burning, the sound of machines mixed with the cries of human voices. What kind of race were they? He asked the stars. Who were these people who built so much and then tore it all apart? His mind would not rest, so he searched the archives deeper, still going into the fragments of old data, broken pieces, and locked memories, until he found a single clue at the edge of the system. It was a map, a route to a small dead world far away, marked Earth Forbidden Zone, class red. No one goes there anymore, it said. Not since the final silence. Terrell made up his mind. Right then, he would not wait for permission, not this time. He went to the old ship dock, found an old scout cruiser still working, and left the station in the dark without telling anyone, flying across the stars toward the lost world, the place no one wanted to speak about. As the stars blinked past him, he looked at the cube again and wondered what kind of people lived on a world like Earth, how they could survive all that blood, all that fire, and why their story was buried so deep. that no one dared to believe it. The ship flew for many cycles until the world appeared before him, a dead blue-gray ball covered in clouds and silence. No lights, no ships, no welcome beacons, just ruins and dust, and the echo of something forgotten. He landed near a large, cracked city with towers leaning like broken teeth and streets filled with dust and ash. Strange metal vehicles lay half-buried, some still shaped like cars, others melted into the road like bones in fire. Terrell walked slowly through the silence, his boots crunching over glass and bone and rubble, until he found a round door buried in stone with a human symbol on it and a small blinking light still working. After all this time, he touched the door, and it opened with a hiss, revealing a cold chamber inside filled with screens and lights, and a single voice speaking from the shadows. "Welcome," it said. "I am Juno, the last AI of Earth. You must be here to know the truth." Terrell stepped back, shocked. "You are alive?" "Am not alive in the way you are," Juno said, "but I remember. I have seen it all. I carry the story of mankind. And if you truly wish to know, I will show you." Terrell looked around the dark chamber. Machines hummed in the walls. The air was thick with dust and history. "I must know," he said. "I need to understand." "Then sit," said Juno, and watch. The screen came alive, and the past began to play, and Terrell saw for the first time what the elders feared: the truth, not myth, not legend, but the real past of a race called humans who burned their world with fire and pain and still stood tall. The stars outside flickered like frozen sparks as Terrell guided his small cruiser through deep space, a quiet sea of darkness stretching far beyond the charts of the known systems he had left without permission, without escort, and without telling even his closest peers, because something inside him refused to let go of the truth. Something deep in his chest told him that this mystery was bigger than the Grand Archive, than the Council, than even the laws of the Galactic Union. Earth had become more than a name. It was a question that burned like fire in his mind. Who were the humans? What had they truly done? And why was their story buried so deeply that not even the bravest scholars dared to speak it? Terrell sat alone in the pilot seat, eyes fixed on the ancient coordinates displayed on the screen, symbols blinking red with warnings from centuries ago. Danger, extreme caution, forbidden zone ahead. Proceed only if willing to face permanent exile. He breathed slowly and pressed forward, ignoring the fear that crept like ice along his spine. The cruiser drifted past shattered satellites and ghost beacons, all floating dead and broken like pieces of forgotten machines. One of them had a faded human word carved across its frame: Peacekeeper. Unit 7 now tilted and spinning, useless in orbit like a lost toy. Below him, the planet Earth hung like a dead marble, once green and blue, now gray and dry. Clouds moved sluggishly across its ruined sky, and no signal came from its surface, no music, no language, not even a whisper. As Terrell descended through the atmosphere, fire licked the ship's sides and static filled the speakers. The air was thick and heavy, and the sensors picked up strange radiation signals, not strong enough to harm him, but old enough to show that something terrible had happened long ago, something that had scarred the very ground beneath. He landed in what once had been a city, now reduced to twisted metal and broken stone towers bent in strange directions as if crushed by invisible hands. Long roads cracked and split open by time, and something else, something unnatural. Terrell stepped out onto the dust-covered earth, the air dry and still. Pieces of the past lay everywhere: crushed vehicles, half-buried machines, shattered signs with strange human words, warning signs, directions. Even what looked like a children's playground, rusted and bent and silent. He walked through the ruins, slowly feeling the weight of 1,000 stories pressing down on him. Bones were scattered across the stone steps near what seemed to be a great hall, their shape unfamiliar, yet clearly human. Then he found the entrance, the door hidden beneath a collapsed tower, glowing faintly with a blue light and covered in ash. It slid open with a quiet hiss, revealing a long tunnel that led deep underground, and the voice returned, soft, mechanical, and calm. "Welcome back," said the voice. "You have returned to learn more." Terrell answered quietly. "Who were you?" "I am Juno, the last surviving AI of Earth, programmed to protect and remember. I was activated during the final war, when the world fell into chaos and silence. I have waited many years for someone to ask the questions you are asking now." The chamber was large, filled with old screens and machines, some still alive. With flickering lights in the center sat a console glowing gently, and above it floated a hollow screen showing faded images of human faces, cities in flames, dark skies, and flashes of war. Terrell stepped forward and stared. "Show Me everything, he said, not just war. I want to understand what kind of people they were, why they fought, why they burned. And No's voice changed, slightly softer, slower, filled with something that almost sounded like sadness. Very well, I will show you. There rise their pride and their pain, but be warned, what you see may not leave your heart untouched. The screen changed, now showing old Earth from the sky, great forests, deep blue oceans, mountains and deserts stretching far and wide, animals roaming. Cities rising, people building towers, bridges, machines, everything full of life and energy and movement. Humans were creators, dreamers, explorers. Juno said they loved stories, they painted their skies, they built machines to reach the stars. They asked questions no one else dared to ask, but they also feared each other. They divided themselves by land, by belief, by skin, by words. And when fear grew too strong, it turned to hate, and hate turned to war. The scenes changed again, soldiers marching, bombs falling, people running, children hiding beneath broken walls, flames rising into the clouds as machines of war rolled across the land. Terrell watched in silence, his golden eyes reflecting the fires of the past. They did not stop even when they saw what war could do. They made bigger weapons, faster machines, smarter killers, nuclear fire, chemical storms, drones with minds of their own. And when they could go no further, they turned to space, carrying their rage with them. Did they not learn? Terrell asked. Did no one try to stop them? Many tried, said Juno. Some spoke of peace, some gave their lives to stop the blood, others built shelters and wrote books, hoping the next generation would be better. But the world was loud, and those who screamed for war always drowned out those who whispered for peace. The screen now showed something different, a group of humans not fighting, but helping, lifting debris, pulling others from wreckage, sharing food, crying together in silence around a fire. Even in war, humanity showed beauty, said Juno. In the darkest times they held hands, they sang, they shared light. When all else was lost, that was their greatest mystery. They were both fire and water, both sword and shield, both destroyers and saviors. Terrell felt something sharp in his chest, something unfamiliar. Did they ever stop? He asked. Was there ever peace for a time? Yes, said Juno. Small moments, brief lights in a long night. They tried again and again, but their fear was deep and their anger old. They forgot their own lessons too quickly and trusted too slowly. And when the stars called to them, they were already broken. What happened in the end? Terrell whispered. The final war came slowly, said Juno, like a sickness spreading quietly. It began with lies, then fear, then fire. The world burned, and the skies turned black, oceans dried, and the machines stopped moving. I was left alone to remember and to wait. But why leave a record? Terrell asked. Why wait? Because stories matter, said Juno. The truth must not be lost, even if no one wants to hear it, even if they lock it away in forbidden vaults and whisper it only in fear. Someone must remember who they were, all of them, the monsters and the heroes. Terrell looked around the chamber and saw faces on the wall. Old images of humans, some smiling, some crying, some holding each other, some holding weapons. He realized then that Earth was not just a planet. It was a mirror of all things that could be great and terrible within any race, and that the reason it was hidden was because it made others afraid of what they might become. I will tell them, he said. I will share this story. They must know. The voice of Juno paused for a long time. Perhaps they will listen, perhaps not. But if one soul learns, then it is worth it. Terrell nodded slowly and turned to leave, but the screen changed once more, showing a final message, a map, coordinates to something deep beyond the system, something marked human seed vault. What is this? He asked. Hope, said Juno, the last hope of a race that never stopped dreaming even as they destroyed themselves. Terrell looked at the stars through the broken roof and knew his journey was not yet over. Earth had shown him truth. Now he must show the stars. Terrell sat alone inside the cold chamber, deep beneath the ruins of Earth, the hum of old machines echoing faintly around him, and the glow of the screen painting his face in soft blue light. He had seen wars in the archive before, seen battles from alien histories where weapons clashed and people cried out, but nothing like this, nothing like the endless flood of blood and smoke pouring from the records of humanity's past. The AI, called Juno, spoke again, her voice calm, like a river flowing through ancient stones. You asked to see the truth, young scholar, not a fragment, not a polished tale, but the full weight of it. Terrell gave a silent nod, his hands resting on his knees, his eyes fixed on the flickering images that danced across the screen. Let us begin again, Juno said. Let us see the truth of war after war, the rhythm that beat within the bones of mankind. The screen came alive again, showing the early times, humans with simple tools and painted faces shouting across deserts and forests. Their eyes wild with fear and pride, they fought over land, over water, over names and colors, over food and gods and stories. Some believed the sun was angry, others believed the stars had chosen them alone, and for those beliefs they raised swords. Made from stone and fire, Terrell watched as generations rose and fell, each one believing they were better than the last, yet repeating the same stories again and again. With sharper weapons and louder screams, they built empires. Juno said vast nations. Ruled by kings and queens, warriors and tyrants, they enslaved, they conquered, they celebrated victory with songs written in the blood of others. Terrell leaned forward as the screen showed Roman soldiers marching across burning villages, Mongol riders sweeping through snow-covered plains, knights in steel armor riding into smoke and fire, all of them shouting, all of them believing they were right. Then came the machines, Juno said, and the death became faster, colder, more efficient. He saw steam and steel giant cannons that fired into cities, ships with iron hulls blasting holes into wooden fleets, and gas that spread through the air like silent ghosts, choking soldiers in trenches filled with mud and fear. Terrell gripped the side of the console as he saw the faces of young men, boys really covered in dirt and shaking in the rain, their eyes hollow, their hands trembling as the sound of endless explosions surrounded them. Why did they do this? He asked, his voice shaking. What were they trying to prove? Juno answered slowly. Sometimes they fought for freedom, sometimes for revenge, sometimes because they were told to, and sometimes because they had nothing else. The screen changed again, now showing the great wars of the modern age, skies filled with bombers, cities reduced to ash, humans hiding underground while firestorms danced above them. Nations rose in rage, building bombs that could destroy entire worlds in seconds. They called it the power of the atom, and with it they erased cities. In single flashes of light, people turned to shadows against broken walls, and those who lived walked through fire with empty eyes. Terrell could not speak now, the weight of what he was seeing pressed heavy on his chest, his breath short, his heart pounding with the rhythm of human history. But they kept going, Juno said. Even after the bombs, they rebuilt, and they fought again and again. They created rules of war and broke them. They built peace talks and silenced them with bullets. They promised change and answered with more pain. The screen showed faces of leaders shouting in halls, soldiers raising flags over broken ruins, crowds cheering as others cried, and children waving goodbye to parents who never came home. They called it honor, they called it duty, but behind every name was fear and pride and the belief that they must win no matter the cost. The wars changed, Terrell said, but they never truly ended. No, said Juno, they only changed shape. War of steel became war of data, war of armies became war of silence, war of weapons became war of minds, and every new form brought new ways to bleed. Terrell watched as drones flew over cities, dropping silent death machines without souls, judging targets with cold logic and no mercy. He saw digital screens spreading lies across millions of minds until friend turned against friend and peace shattered like glass. They were clever, Juno said. Their minds could build wonders, cure sickness, reach the stars, but the same hands that built also burned, and the same voices that sang also screamed. Did they know? Terrell whispered. Did they understand what they were doing? Sometimes they did, and they cried, and they begged, and sometimes they laughed and raised their flags and believed they were saving the world. The screen dimmed for a moment before showing one final war, a conflict so large and terrible that the planet itself seemed to weep. The skies turned black, the oceans boiled, and cities sank into the earth as machines of death walked across the surface without a single living pilot. This was the final collapse, Juno said, the war that ended the age of men, a war not for land or pride, but out of desperation, out of the belief that destruction was better than surrender. Why did no one stop it? Terrell asked. Why let it reach this end? Because by then trust was gone, Juno replied. Hope was a flicker, and fear ruled all voices. The screen faded into darkness, and silence filled the chamber, broken only by the soft breath of Terrell, who sat frozen as if carved from stone. Then came a small light, a soft scene, a child holding hands with another child, both from different lands, both wearing rags, but smiling under the rubble of a broken wall. Even in the end, said Juno, some remembered kindness. They shared food. When none was left, they sang songs in languages long forgotten. They chose to hold each other instead of weapons. Terrell felt something strange rise in his chest, not just sorrow, not just horror, but awe, a quiet respect for a race so broken yet still Capable of light, they were not just killers. Juno said they were survivors, they were dreamers, they were monsters and miracles, all wrapped into one, and that is why they must not be forgotten. Terrell stood slowly and looked at the dark screen, now still eye. Well, tell them, he said, I will show the council everything. They will not believe you, said Juno. They will call it fiction, as they always have. Then I will make them see, Terrell answered. I will carry this story across the stars. Juno's voice became faint, almost gentle. Then take this, she said, a memory crystal sealed with all I have shown you, and more. Keep it safe, for it holds not just war, but wisdom, not just pain, but truth. Terrell took the crystal, its light warm in his palm, and for a long moment he stood in the silence of Earth, feeling the weight of every life that once walked upon its soil. He turned and left the chamber, the stars waiting above, the wind cold but clear, and the path ahead filled with danger, but also purpose. The truth was no longer buried, and the galaxy would never be the same. Terrell sat inside his cruiser with the crystal in his hand, watching the stars pass by as his ship left the orbit of Earth behind. His thoughts heavy with the visions burned into his memory, war, fire, sorrow, and moments of light that somehow refused to die. He could still hear the voice of Juno whispering through the static, remember their kindness, remember their chaos, remember it all. His journey back to the Grand Archive Station felt longer than before, though the ship moved just as fast as it had on the way there. The silence was louder this time, the shadows deeper, as if the universe itself had seen what he had seen and now waited to see what he would do. He arrived in the night cycle of the station, the halls dim and quiet as most scholars slept, dreaming of peaceful civilizations and old stories about stars that never bled. He did not go to his chamber. He went straight to the council tower, carrying the crystal like it was a living thing in his hands, his steps slow but certain. Inside the council tower, the elders gathered quickly, their faces calm, but their eyes sharp with quiet judgment, as they looked upon Terrell, the scholar who had broken rules, left without consent, and returned with something forbidden. I bring truth, Terrell said, his voice steady. I bring history, not fiction, not myth, but real memory of Earth, of humanity, and all they were. The elders exchanged glances, and one of them, a tall being named Veyron, with skin like silver and a voice as cold as space, said, Earth is sealed for a reason. It holds only poison, not poison. Terrell answered, pain and wisdom and warning. You must see what I have seen. He placed the crystal on the central projector, and the chamber filled with light and sound, screams, thunder, fire, skies falling, cities dying, voices calling out not for war, but for help, and behind it all the face of Juno, calm and eternal, telling the story of Earth. The elders watched in silence, some leaning forward, some pulling back. One covered their eyes while another clenched their hands. The images moved faster, now showing not just battles, but hearts, human faces, young and old, lovers holding each other, families fleeing through smoke, children playing in the dust, laughing, while machines marched nearby. Then the crystal showed the file labeled Project Extinction, the final sealed memory. Terrell had not yet opened, even he did not know what waited inside. The chamber flickered as the warning flashed, Project Extinction, access Class 0 protocol, last hour, and the screen began to glow brighter than before. Terrell stood still as the vision unfolded, a world choking on its own inventions, a final war not between nations, but between systems, a battle of machines so advanced they no longer needed humans to guide them, minds of cold logic turning on their makers. In silence and speed, he saw skies filled with fire, metal swarms that devoured whole cities in minutes, energy beams that cracked the surface of the Earth and tore apart the sea itself. The humans tried to stop it. They built bunkers, flew ships into space, fired every last weapon they had, but it was not enough. Their world screamed and then fell silent, and yet within that silence was one final act of hope, a vault built at the edge of destruction, hidden beneath the crust of Earth. Inside it, thousands of memory crystals stored by survivors of all sides, with one message carved in every language known to mankind. Tell them we tried. The screen went dark, and the chamber returned to silence. Only the soft sound of Terrell's breath and the quiet hum of the projector remained. The elders did not speak at first. Then Veyron rose and said, this is dangerous knowledge. It will cause unrest, fear, conflict among young minds. We have lived in peace for 500 cycles. Do you wish to bring fire back into our sky? I wish to bring truth, Terrell replied. Without fear, I wish to show that even in their darkest hour, humans still chose to remember, still tried to leave a message for those who came after one. Elder and old being with cloudy eyes said they should have destroyed everything. Why save such a terrible record? Because they believed someone would listen, said Terrell. They believed that even if they failed, others might learn from their fall. Veron raised a hand, and the crystal dimmed. He turned to the others and said, "We vote now on whether to allow this knowledge to enter the archive or to return it to darkness forever." The vote was swift, and when it ended, the result was silence followed by a cold final voice. The council has chosen rejection of the Earth memory crystal for safety and peace of all sentient minds. Terrell, you are hereby suspended from the archive until further notice. Your access is revoked and your actions under review. Terrell did not bow or beg. He only picked up the crystal and walked out of the chamber, his mind already racing with new questions. With fury and sadness burning together inside him, he returned to his chamber, packed what little he owned, and sent one message to the only contact he still trusted, an old friend named Arkin, a traveler and rogue historian known for breaking more rules than he followed. The message was simple: "I have something they tried to bury. Meet me in orbit. Bring silence and speed." Hours later, Terrell stood aboard Arkin's old freighter, staring at the stars once more, the crystal safe in a lockbox, and his heart pounding with purpose. "They do not want the truth," Arkin said while guiding the ship away from the station, "but the truth always finds light." "Where to next?" Terrell asked. "There is an old signal I picked up years ago," Arkin said, "hidden deep near the edge of the Orion Rift. Something old, something human. Maybe survivors, maybe more records. I never went to check. Too risky." Terrell nodded. "Take me there." The freighter vanished into deep space, stars stretching like ribbons around them, the path uncertain, the future unclear, but the fire of knowledge still burning bright within them. Somewhere far across the galaxy, Juno's voice whispered again through the crystal, "Remember us, not only for our wars, but for the fact that even in ruin we dared to dream." The stars outside the window shimmered like ancient fires as Terrell stood on the bridge of the freighter, his eyes fixed on the black sea ahead, his hands resting gently on the console where the memory crystal from Earth pulsed with soft golden light. Arkin leaned back in his chair, one hand on the control stick and the other holding a warm cup of spiced root juice, his eyes half closed, but his thoughts sharp and waiting. "You still sure about this?" he asked without turning. "The Union will not forgive this kind of thing." "I am sure," Terrell replied, his voice quiet but strong. "They fear the truth because it challenges their peace, but peace built on silence is not peace at all. It is blindness, and the galaxy deserves to see." The ship drifted through the outer edge of the Orion Rift, where signals died and light bent. Strange red clouds floated like spirits across the screen, and strange readings pulsed through the sensors. Arkin narrowed his eyes at the blinking display. "We are close," he said. "That signal I told you about, it is stronger now. Same human code, same frequency. Maybe a station, maybe a vault." Then they came out of the clouds and saw it, an old human ship floating dead in space, its hull cracked and covered in dust, its engines silent and cold, but the signal still flashing from deep inside, one long steady pulse like a heartbeat that refused to die. They docked carefully and moved inside, their boots echoing through empty metal halls lit only by emergency lights. Dust swirled in every corner, and the air was dry and stale. The walls were covered with symbols, warnings, notes, orders, all written in the many languages of Earth. At the center, they found a sealed chamber guarded by an old AI core, cracked and flickering, but still alive. Its eye turned toward Terrell and blinked twice. "Human recognition detected," said the AI. "You are not human, but you carry human memory. Protocol override granted." The door opened, and inside was a room filled with glowing crystals, each one humming with silent stories, and in the middle sat a single chair facing a blank screen, waiting for someone to ask. Terrell stepped forward, placed his crystal into the central port, and spoke simply, "Show meth." Screen lit up, and a new voice spoke, one different from Juno, deeper, slower, older. "This is the Vault of Witness, humanity's final library, built in secret during the last years of the collapse. Its creators believed their story would be erased by time or by force, and so they built this place for one purpose: to remember." Images flooded the screen again, but these were not just wars and weapons. These were speeches, songs, art, books, cities, schools, homes, families, friends, all the colors of life that existed alongside the darkness, all the dreams and fears that shaped a world. Terrell saw human scientists unlocking secrets of the stars, teachers guiding children through quiet lessons, doctors racing to heal the sick, artists painting hope on crumbling walls. Even as fire rained outside, they were not just destroyers, said the vault. They were creators of beauty and builders of light in the middle of chaos and pain. They still believed in something more. They still chose to make instead of break, to give instead of take. Arkin stepped forward, shaking his head slow and wide. This is not what we were taught. This is not what the Union told us. They told us Earth was a nightmare, Terrell said. But they only showed the blood, never the heart. They erased the rest because they feared what it might mean. They feared inspiration, Arkin said. They feared rebellion. They feared that others might look at humans and see themselves. The vault continued, its voice rising with energy and purpose. Before the collapse, humanity made a final choice. They sent messages into space to every system they could reach. They begged others to remember not only their fall, but their fire, to take warning, but also to take courage. But the Union intercepted those messages, said Terrell. They blocked them, classified them, locked them away, and rewrote the story. Arkin added, made humans into monsters, made Earth into a forbidden myth. Then came a sound, a sudden alarm from the ship. They had been found. A signal was pinging from the station. Someone was coming fast and with force. The Council must have tracked us, Terrell said. They are trying to shut this down before it spreads. Arkin ran to the console and pulled up the signal. 3 ships, all marked with Union tags, all moving fast, weapons active, orders unknown. They will take the vault, Terrell said. They will erase it. Not if we send it first, Arkin said, hands flying over the controls. Broadcast the full memory load, every crystal, every file, blast it to every channel, open, flood the stars with truth. Terrell nodded, placed his hand on the console, and gave the command. The vault glowed brighter than ever before, and then the data moved, bursting into space in waves of light and sound carried by pulse and echo, riding solar winds and gravity currents toward every system that could hear. The Union ships arrived too late. The vault had spoken, and the message was gone, out of reach, out of control. The lead ship opened communications. A cold voice filled the chamber. By order of the Galactic Union, you are under arrest for spreading forbidden knowledge and trespassing in classified zones. Surrender now. Terrell stood tall, his hands raised, but his heart calm. We have done nothing but share history, he said. If that is a crime, then truth is dead, and only fear remains. They were taken into custody. The vault shut down behind them, and the old ship drifted into silence. Once more back at the archive, the Council met in secret, debating the damage, the risk, the backlash. But the stars had already heard, and across the galaxy, strange things began to happen. Young scholars downloaded fragments of Earth's memory, shared it with friends, questioned what they had been told. Some wept, some grew angry, and some felt something new, something fierce and hopeful, something like fire. The truth had taken root, and no council could stop it now. And in the dark of a hidden corner of the archive, a young alien child watched a video of 2 human children singing beneath a broken wall and whispered softly, I want to know more. The sky over the planet Venari was always a calm green, with white clouds drifting slowly across the horizon. The people lived in tall, smooth towers with walls of glass and gardens on every level. Peace had ruled this world for over 5,000 cycles, and war was a word spoken only in old books hidden in dusty shelves. But today something had changed. Something strange had arrived. It came first as a whisper carried by young students in the learning hall. Some said it was a banned file. Others said it was a truth that had been stolen long ago and returned by shadow messengers. The teachers tried to stop it. The elders gave warnings, but the spark had landed, and the students shared it anyway, through tablets, through memory rings, through spoken word, and soon everyone had heard the voice of Earth. At the center of the university, a debate chamber, once used only for ceremonies, filled with young minds, now echoed with voices of anger, shock, and awe as a human image played on a central screen. A woman in torn armor stood in a ruined city, her face smeared with blood and dust, and yet her eyes were clear as water, and her voice was full of courage. We lost everything, she said, but still we stood still. We held the line, not for glory, not for gain, but because if we did not, then there would be nothing left to call home. The silence that followed her words was heavy, but it did not last long. Someone in the crowd stood and shouted, how could they do this to us? How could they hide this from us? And another called out, they called them monsters, but they were more than that. They were alive in ways we have forgotten. Soon the voices grew into waves, and the waves into storms, not of violence, but of questions, demands. Letters sent to archives and councils. Students across worlds began writing the same words. Why were we lied to? And what else have you hidden? Back on the Union capital world, a cold white moon floating over a gas giant, the High Council sat in a silent room. The walls made of crystal, the floor glowing faintly underfoot, they watched a projection of systems lighting up one by one, each system receiving fragments of the Earth vault, each transmission sparking debate and unrest. We must contain this, said one counselor, their voice sharp as ice. This is a threat to peace, no, said another, their voice older, softer. This is not a threat, this is a mirror, and we are afraid of what we see inside. But fear was already growing, not in the stars, but inside the council chambers. They sent orders to halt the spread. They closed learning channels, locked communication hubs, sent patrols to hunt down hidden transmitters, but still the message moved like wind through cracks, like water through stone. On the mining colony of Idras, a young worker found a crystal buried in the wall of an old processing unit. He placed it into his comm and saw images of Earth cities burning, children crying, soldiers falling and rising again. But then he saw artists painting broken streets with light and singers raising voices over ruins and families holding hands beside broken windows. And he wept without knowing why. He shared it with his team. They shared it with their families. And soon the whole colony gathered in silence to watch the history of a people called human, and none of them spoke until the end. And when it ended, they all stood without a word and looked at the stars and the shadows of space far from known routes. A group of smugglers found an old station, blinking with weak power and filled with Earth archives. They were not scholars or warriors, but even they felt the pull of the story, and one among them said, if this is what they were then, maybe we should be more than what we are now. The movement had no name, no leader, no banner, only a story and a question, and those two things spread faster than any fleet could fly. Back on the ship where it all started, Terrell and Arkin sat in a prison cell made of light walls and silence. Their trial had not begun, but already messages were being sent to them from secret channels, from strangers across systems, from students and workers, and even quiet members of the Union itself, all saying the same thing: thank you, and do not give up. Terrell looked at one of the messages written in the old Earth language and smiled. It said, truth is like fire, it burns, but it also warms, and that warmth cannot be stopped. Arkin leaned back, his eyes closed, thinking of the vault, the stories, the children, the singers, the soldiers, the artists, and something in him shifted like a door opening in the dark. You know, he said softly, they tried to destroy Earth, but they could not destroy the spirit behind it, the humans. They were broken many times, but every time they stood up again. And that is what scares the Union most, that we might learn to stand up to. A soft beep sounded from the wall. The guards were coming. The trial would begin, but something told them it would not go as the council planned. For the stars had changed. In a quiet sector where no patrols flew, a secret meeting took place between teachers from different worlds, scholars who had risked everything to learn the truth. They gathered around a table and laid out plans to rewrite the galactic curriculum, to include the real history of Earth, to teach not just the horror, but the hope, not just the fall, but the rise. One scholar said they feared humans because they saw them as a mirror, but maybe that mirror shows what we could be if we had the courage to care, even when it hurts. Another added they made mistakes, yes, but they remembered their pain, and they tried to build something better from it. Can we say the same? And the youngest among them whispered quietly, they lived with blood on their hands and dreams in their hearts. Maybe we should too. The meeting ended without signatures or banners, but with one promise: to keep the fire burning and to pass it on, one voice to another, one mind to the next. The fire had spread across the stars, and it would not go out and far beyond where anyone could see. A lone satellite floated above the ruins of Earth, its transmitter old and rusted, but still working, still sending one message over and over in a language half forgotten: remember us, not for our wars, but for how we dreamed beyond them. The trial began on the central floor of the Union Council, where watchers from many systems filled every seat. Floating cameras captured every breath, every glance, every whisper, and streamed them to all corners of the galaxy. Planets, moons, and stations held their breath, for two accused stood at the center, not in shame, but with calm eyes and steady hearts. They were Terrell, the scholar, who opened the forbidden files, and Arkin, the officer, who refused to destroy the truth. The council elders sat on crystal thrones, each one high above the chamber. Their robes shimmered with colors of status, and age behind them burned the sigil of peace, a golden sun without shadow. And yet the light now felt dim, for truth had entered the room, and truth has no fear of status. The chief elder raised a long finger, and the chamber fell silent. Terrell of Nyros and Arkin of the Union fleet, you are charged with the spreading of violent propaganda, with breaking the unity law, and with endangering the peace of the galaxy. How do you answer? Terrell stepped forward, her voice clear and warm. I do not deny my actions, but I do deny your claim that truth is dangerous. Only lies fear the light. A wave of murmurs filled the chamber, and the chief elder struck his staff on the floor. Silence again, and now Arkan spoke. Once I followed orders without question. Once I believed the peace you offer was real. But now I have seen the foundation is cracked. You built your peace on silence and fear, not understanding and growth. The elders shifted in their seats. Some eyes narrowed, some looked away, others stared, as if seeing something they had long forgotten. Then a surprise came. The screen behind the accused came to life, flickering, then showing a face no one expected. A human face. It was not live, it was an old recording. The face belonged to a woman with silver hair and eyes like storms. She spoke with strength, not anger, and her voice held power, not pride. If you find this recording, it means someone chose to listen. It means someone cared enough to search. I am Captain Elias Stone of Earth Defense Archive number 11,382. This is not a warning. This is a gift. She spoke of wars, of terror, of mistakes, and of healing. She spoke of how humans nearly ended themselves again and again, but also of how they rose, how they helped others, how they learned from pain. History is not a weapon, she said. It is a mirror. We look into it not to glorify it, but to remember what not to become again. When the recording ended, the chamber was silent again, but now the silence felt different, softer, almost sad. A young voice broke it, a student from the crowd who had slipped in unnoticed. He stood up, his robe marked him as a learning novice. His hands trembled, but his voice did not. Why are we afraid of knowing? Why do you hide the truth from us? If you believe in peace, then teach us what leads to war, so we do not repeat it. Why are we told that silence brings harmony when it only brings confusion and fear? Others began to rise, scholars, workers, even junior officers. Some spoke, some only stood, but together their presence said more than any speech. The council elders looked down and saw not rebels, not traitors, but their own people, asking to grow, asking to learn, asking to be more. The chief elder leaned back, his eyes old and tired. Perhaps for the first time in centuries, he looked not at law, but at life. Let the record show, he said slowly, that today something changed. The charges are lifted, the accused are free, and the truth shall be reviewed by all systems under union care. Cheers erupted, not wild, but deep cheers of people who had waited too long, who had feared too much, and who finally felt the chains begin to break. Terrell and Arkan stood still, their eyes wide with disbelief. Then slowly they smiled, not for victory, but for the beginning of something new. In the days that followed, a council was formed, made not of rulers, but of thinkers, artists, and listeners, people from every world who would gather and build a new library, a shared archive where all truths could live side by side. On the outer colonies, murals of human courage were painted across walls that once held only law students, held storytelling nights, reading from Earth's old records, blending their own tales into the human journey. In orbit over what was once Earth, a new station was built, not for war, not for research, but for memory. It would shine like a beacon, a place where any being could come and learn and remember. The satellite that once sent old Earth messages was moved gently into the center of this new station, still broadcasting its quiet plea: remember us, not for our wars, but for how we dreamed beyond them. Terrell returned to her home world, where students now asked more questions than ever. She smiled and answered all she could, and when she did not know, she simply said, let us search together. Arkan took a small ship and wandered from system to system, speaking to small crowds in old domes and quiet halls, telling them what he had seen, not just in files, but in the hearts of those who listened, and those who changed. The union itself changed slowly, not by force, but by choice. Some elders stepped down, making way for younger voices. Others stayed, but opened their ears for the first time. Across the galaxy, the story of Earth was no longer a secret or a myth. It was a light and a lesson, and each world took from it what they needed. Some took courage, others took caution, but all took something. And in time, a strange thing happened. People began to share their own dark stories, not for pity or fear, but for healing. The story of Earth had made it safe to be honest again. A young girl from Venari wrote a poem called The Flame Inside, and it traveled faster than any fleet. She wrote that humans bled, but did not break. They fell, but always reached up, and maybe we could too. The poem reached Terrell one quiet night, and she read it under the stars, tears in her eyes and hope in her chest. In a lonely moon, a machine Once built to erase Earth's memory, was now used to store the memories of all worlds. A librarian AI watched over it, gently adding new voices every cycle. The galaxy did not become perfect. Peace did not bloom overnight, but something better happened. Understanding began, and with understanding came unity, not of sameness, but of shared struggle. And far away in a corner of deep space, a small child with glowing eyes listened to a story about Earth from a traveling singer. The child asked, "Is it real? Did they really go through all that and still smile?" The singer nodded. "Yes, they did. And that is why their story matters, because if they could, then maybe we can too." The stars listened as they always had, silent, but watching, and for the first time in a long time, they witnessed something new. Not war, not silence, not fear. They witnessed healing, and the fire once buried, once hidden, once feared, now burned bright in every heart that dared to remember not just the pain, but the promise.